where would you actually like us to start for that?
Well, I think you told a brief history of how the explorers came to be. Perhaps we could start with that.
Okay.
And then you can cue whoever else you want to talk.
Actually, I would like to cue Connor for the role of how the SEE, the Society for Extraordinary Explorers, came to be. Because there was a story for that, and they never, as far as I know, got to tell it. Connor, do you have that prepared, or shall I take a start at it? You can type if your voice isn't ready yet. Yes, you got you. That's all right. The society was formed over 100 years ago outside of the Fairlands. So this is the first time that the Children of Stories have hailed from outside of the realm that they were playing host to. This was very unusual and even confused the Guardians, who had grown to expect all of the children to have been born, raised, or protecting the realm that they called home. But here, for the first time, everybody was from outside the same realm. So for a while, they thought that they were the wrong children. But as shown by the end of the story, Fairlanders come in all shapes and sizes and from different places. So by the end, they were Fairlanders, just like everybody else. And that was the brief history of the society and their place in the Fairlands this year. And their goal was to search for the history of the Amethyst Rift, which had been studied by the Professor Crackpotter, who, despite his name, was not a crackpot. He was falling into the Fairlands year after year and had discovered the Amethyst Rift. He helped restore some of the lost technology. And from there, we have a story of intrigue and deception, a few traitors here and there, though not of their own free will. It was quite interesting to get to see how it played out, especially since none of the children were aware of the story before we began. They come, they get to experience it, and they learn it all firsthand. And that's what I would say, just in answer to the first question. Saffia? How else would you like to begin from there? Or where would you like to go from there?
Well, with that as a background, perhaps you could run through the events that actually happened during the fair, because I think some of the people here have come here because they didn't know what happened. They all weren't able to follow the full story. So perhaps if you could let them know what actually happened, the whole going through the story.
Okay, now that the... In that case, who would like to tell that part of the story? Connor or Lynx? I can keep talking by all means, but I want to give everybody a chance. Okay, I'll keep going then. The story began just right... Oh, wait. Did somebody try to talk?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Connor.
Okay. So, I'm Connor Bagshaw, Bardic Squirrel, and of course, I do like to tell a story now and again. So, let's see if I can summarize this. Now, let's see. As Strivecore has explained, the young explorers were they were under the supervision of Professor Crackpotter, who was an interesting fellow, I think we could say. and yes, quite soon after their arrival, and possibly before they had actually received adequate instruction on how to perhaps be good explorers, they were left in a terrible state with no adult supervision particularly. And as a result, they had to... One moment. I seem to have an audio issue. Ah, here we go. Yes, now where was I? Yes, indeed. So to begin with, they all arrived and told their stories. This is a tradition among children of stories, and as such, they told their tales of how they had been rejected by the Society of Extraordinary Explorers and put into the remedial class of rejects, and would have to prove themselves. And at this event, they learned about all sorts of backstory, and also they met, I believe, the Knights of the Rift, who told them that they had entrusted the, should we call them the sea? It's a lot quicker to say sea, I think.
Young archaeologists or just archaeologists would do.
Yeah, well, in this case, I was referring to the organisation as a whole, Professor Crackpotter and so forth.
Society, then.
The society, yes. The society had, as Strivecore has already explained, the society had been visiting in the form of Professor Crackpotter for many years, and as such, the knights who told this amazing story of their history as being protectors who had been generation after generation supporting the Rift, and at the time believed that they were descendants of 6 mighty knights. And unfortunately, during this event, they were attacked. All of the explorers, juniors, adults, and knights were attacked by a terrifying creature made of rock and energy. And at this point, Professor Crackpotter did disappear. And chaos ensued, but the Guardians helped, and I think everything was under control very soon. But after that point, Professor Crackpotter, I think it's fair to say, did not provide the degree of adult supervision that one might expect from the leader of a group of young people. Yes, indeed, thank you, young demon. That's true. We did not know that yet. In fact, I believe the next day there was a series of adventures, chaotic chase sequences of use of some fantastical scanning technology, sonic technology, I believe, doesn't do wood. And luckily the fractal was made mostly of stone and ley energy and so forth. And then it was...
Can I inject right here for just a second?
You go ahead.
I've just provided a link to the fractal. And there's some stuff that I want to make sure is covered. Because during this time, and this is something that Connor could not know, was that there was another group meeting nearby, the Shadows of the Unweaver, who were from the first year of the Children of Stories. They had finally returned and were secretly meeting every evening, unbeknownst to the rest of the campers. And they were making plans on the fly, I might add, about how they would disrupt the children and how they would prevent them during the day from achieving their goals. So a number of children, other players, got together and actually made their way to interfere during this time, secretly. And that was part of the story as well, even though they were making it up as they went. And that's where Itzy and many of the other villains, which we'll talk about later, will come up. In fact, that evening, they decided, because they had not known about the fractal, to frame it and start calling it a monster of the Unweaver, even though it was not on their side. They just wanted to make sure that the secret of this place was kept. Now, this isn't something that you'll find anywhere else, so I just had to interject there because if we skipped over that, none of the rest that's coming up will make any sense. Go ahead and continue, Connor.
Yes, indeed. And I really should stress to everyone who has been involved, my typist, my kind keyboard caddy has been performing some of the NPCs this year, and I can confirm our roleplay is not scripted. In fact, often we're just finding ourselves right in the middle of the action, having absolutely no idea what's going to happen next, which is thrilling in some ways. And, well, it's good that I work well under pressure, let's just say that. So, where was I? Yes, so apparently there were, the shadows were meeting every night to decide things. This explains many things, I feel. Yes, there was a chase sequence, and it had been discovered that the fractal was, had a mixture of stone and ley line energy going on. And as a result, yes, I think at this point there was a plan afoot to capture the fractal, and as a result, the young explorers had to go off on yet another quest, this time a travel quest across many lands where I was not present and have very little idea what occurred. So perhaps someone else could take over at this point.
Thanks. Would you like to cover what happened on that journey? Because I also was not there, except as an alt near the end. So go. Perhaps you can explain the journey to the Scrimshaw Warrens to find a Snowfire crystal. You are Softpaw, the one. If not, I'm going to be working off of memory here of something I've read but did not participate in. Oh, okay, you're typing it. That works. I'll read it out loud when you're done because this, as far as I'm aware, this is being recorded too. No, I don't think there's any candy. The candy was last night when the candy bus drove by. Yes, you missed the candy bus. Sorry about that. There was two other characters that we haven't mentioned yet who played vital roles in the story, and that would have been Lady Vivian Trim, who was one of the high counselors of the society, who was trying to watch over the children. However, she treated it like a bum job, like she got given the short end of the stick to even have to be there, especially at first. And the other was known as Arnold, who, though dressing like a pirate, Lady Vivian listened to him when he complained about all the safety and dangers around the camp and made him the safety officer. He kind of said that that was the worst idea that anybody had ever had in the history of ever, but he did the job, but he was also one of the shadows. So, yeah, that was probably not the best idea.
Can I say something about Arnold?
Who? Sure, yeah, you could say anything.
There's this links here At first, Lynx got angry at Arnold about something and was growling at him. And I'll say it later. Softball is typing in something.
Okay. So, actually, Lynx, you can go ahead and read this part that she just posted out loud, if you'd like.
Well, this is Softball's reading now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what she said. We set off from the rift and, well, trying to keep a group our size and eager as it is can be tricky. Yes, it was tricky. Lynx cast spells to allow the kids to breathe underwater and regroup up in Junction. There, Cal told us that he had seen Arnold ahead of us. He flew ahead. Cal is our other guardian, who is a fire guardian, and he is a phoenix. He flew ahead, and we followed behind. By the time we met him, Arnold and his companion had gotten into a fight and killed him. Cal is a phoenix, so he just regenerated and was now a small and cute. Yes, he was. But Arnold has stolen his firestone as well. No, keep talking.
Yeah, she's still typing. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
Kale started that fight.
Yes, he did. Well, yes, my take on Arnold is that he was exactly a shadow himself, but worked as a familiar for a witch who turned into a shadow. So
That is true.
he also, I think, got into the short end of the stick as well. Well, yeah, he's also hot-headed. I agree, Damon. But
Yeah.
by near the end of the story, Lynx is coming to an understanding of the whole situation with Arnold and started being friends to him. As such, of an understanding.
This is true.
And at the end, she called Arnold a friend and brother because he's also a cat.
Yes. And this was just to give everybody time while Softball keeps trying to tell us exactly what happened on the way to the Scrimshaw Warrens. Because that is coming up. So let me read
Okay.
this part.
This is
Keep going. Go ahead.
This is back to Softball of what she wrote. So I'm going to read it again. We made it the rest of the way to the Warrens. Looking for the crystal, we ran into Arnold and his companion, a mute fox child named Whisper, again. Cal confronted him, and Arnold just willingly gave him the Firestone back, which was confusing, and there was a worry that he did something to it. It took us a while to find the needed crystals, and when we did, the Unweaver had put a shield in front of it. Arnold drained the power from the shield and vanished. The children then managed to get the stone, and we headed back. Oh, and this is back to me again.
Go ahead.
The cave was a fire cave, and stone was a mixture of fire and ice.
Mm-hmm. Snow
So-
fire crystal.
Thank you. So, and it's supposed to be unique.
Oops. Yes. And that's... can I take this back for just a second?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so in order to help make this cohesive, by this point in time, the children had gone to the knights to ask for their help in scanning the creature. Something that we had not mentioned is why they went to go and get the Snowfire crystal. It was because 2 other members of the society had arrived at the camp. Professor Crackpotter had called for them, and as such, they arrived to find, instead of helping him with the tomb that he uncovered, they now had to assist with capturing the creature. So they suggested that they needed a scan, and so the children went to the knights to try to get their help for it. After scanning the creature, which did not harm them, despite many chances to do so, that was when they returned to camp and they studied the frequencies, the 5 frequencies that had been mentioned before. In order to resonate with the proper frequencies to trap and attract the creature, they needed a Snowfire crystal, which would, by its very nature, be able to resonate with opposites. And that was why we had hunted that. However, as you could see from what they have told you so far, the journey was laden with peril and with traps. And unfortunately, it did end with a deceased guardian. However, since Kale was reborn and tiny, this is the point in the story where Kale ran away embarrassed, especially as he got sick with the bird flu that was part of the quest. Now, that wasn't planned at all, but he ran with it. He totally just decided that since the entire thing was that he'd have a high-pitched voice, or if his voice would be off-key from the flu, that there was no way, being small and tiny, that he would go back to camp. No way. So he ran off at this point. He was found later, but let's continue to the next day. Connor, or anyone, feel free to tell everybody what happened at the next day at the party when they tried to resonate using music and different tones that would... Well, I'll let you tell it.
Yes, I thought you were going to tell the entire story for a moment there. Yes. Well, as I'm sure many here know, the technology of the Fairlands is often enhanced and boosted by the power of the bards, because here in the Fairlands, the bards are extremely powerful. And, well, you can do almost anything with bardic magic, but of course it does tend to take something around 2 hours, maybe 2.5, and considerably large amounts of dancing and music and joy and, oh yes, charity. Yes, charity is quite important as well. So, as a result, well, first of all, while the young explorers were off on their quest, the gadgeteer had, Lilith, had been working very hard to create some very interesting technology that would use these crystals that the explorers were finding to power this trap. It's all very resonance. Everything in the rift, the Amethyst Rift, seems to be extremely based on musical energy, or at least tones and resonances. So as a result, during this this dance extravaganza, the one by one, the crystals were activated until the trap turned into a ball of purple energy. And, well, surprisingly, the fractal... Did we know that the monster was called a fractal at this point? Anyway, the creature walked straight into there.
We were aware that somebody had decided to coin the term the fractal. That was it.
Very curious name. would really like to know where that came from. What was that?
I can tell the backstory of that later.
So, as a result, very quickly the monster was captured, fractal, as we knew from there, but not from where. And then it was word was suddenly introduced from one of the knights who had arrived from afar and seen many portents, lightning strikes without thunder, without lightning, lightning without thunder, storms without clouds, lights appearing in the sky, all sorts of alarming things. And I think I think we learned later that the shadows had enhanced this disruption to put the cat among the proverbial pigeons of the knights and cause them to believe very strongly that there was no need for the young explorers to study the fractal any further. It was absolutely clear that this monster was from the evil that had come through the rift originally, through the portal, way back in the story of their origin with the 6 knights. And as a result, they would have 3 or 4 days, and after that time, they would absolutely destroy this terrible evil, and then they left. And obviously, this left the explorers with a little bit of a deadline that they had to work towards to find the true story that was actually going on with the fractal and save the day before the misled and tricked knights caused destruction. Is that a good enough summary for you, Strifeclaw?
Absolutely. There's a few things that I would add, but they're completely coincidental.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, like things like Itzy was the one who dropped the blood on the book so that Damocles didn't see her up there. Stuff that actually played out in world. It was fun.
Very good.
Nobody knew what was going on.
Yes, I do enjoy the role-playing interactions that we sometimes end up having with perhaps one person who isn't one of the backstage team actually witnessing it. We just like role-playing.
Exactly. Like I said, none of this is scripted ahead of time. We only know the backstory when everything is created. Everything else is the campers telling their story. Everything else is the players. How they find it and what they do with it is completely up to them in the end. So, we went from trapping the creature to finding out that the creature was quite happy to be trapped, which was something of a surprise to the campers and to everybody else as well. It tried to speak to them because up until now, it had not been able to communicate. Everything was completely and totally confusing. It would just scream and rant and look like it was trying to attack or communicate, throwing its arms about. But at the end of the day, for the first time, inside of this thing that was working against it, it had, in fact, stabilized it. So once it was stable, it was able to find ways to communicate through draining local resources, like the Guardians, making them tired and weak, at least for a little while. But it allowed them to communicate their story, which was to thank them for capturing it, but that one of them was missing. It just kept saying, find her. It was a new mystery, and one which, as of yet, they had no clues. And so, the children set out to find Professor Crackpotter, who they had all but forgotten. In fact, that some of them had turned against Professor Crackpotter because they had been misled by Damon and some of the other shadows into thinking that he didn't care about them, that he was just another cruel adult who thought them as rejects and that they were worthless, which was a recurring theme throughout all of this. In fact, it was making some of the children, at least Iceli, quite angry. From there, they discovered a way to find Professor Crackpotter when the fractal told them where to look, next to the bloody book. They went there, and there was a new tomb open. They went inside, and they found that Professor Crackpotter had been trapped there, hiding ever since the shadows tried to kidnap him on the first night. They had faked it to make it look like the fractal had attacked and kidnapped the professor, thus the energy scarring outside of his tent. However, because of this, they now knew that there were enemies about. Enemies that had actually taken a couple of them captive and corrupted a few of them. So they looked at the professor, who told them that in this tomb there were translations. However, they could not fully translate it. There was some kind of interference preventing them from finding out the entire truth. They scanned it, they looked for it, and it seemed to tell of the same tale that the Knights of the Rift had told, of the 6 knights, the 6 children, actually, that had helped fight off the great evil that had come from the portal in the rift. Because all the people from the rift had disappeared thousands of years ago, which is something we shouldn't have skipped over, but since we were going to start from where the children knew, I did skip over it. The people of the rift were all gone, thousands of years ago, as I said, and here was its story right in front of them for the first time. Except it was different than the knights had told it, of a great evil coming out of the portal in the rift, the broken one, where monsters had swarmed over and killed, and all but the 6. No, in this, the story was that the High Jarl had sent the children to fight off the evil, yes, though never called them evil. It was obfuscated. No, instead, it just said that they were fighting, and that they were blowing the horn of a Zebo to keep the portal going, but the portal collapsed, and it seemed that the children, after all the rest of the Amethyst people had escaped through the portal, those 6 were trapped within the portal. And unbeknownst to them, they had a piece of that horn with them. And without that, the portal could never again be opened. Now here's where it ties into Cancer. Because those children were lost forever in their own salvation, their own cure, which is, as we all know, or rather as I'm explaining now, was the symbolism of being caught in your cancer treatments and the suffering that you go through in order to get healthy again. And by the end of the story, we bring an end to the suffering. We get them out the other side. So in a way, we become the caregivers, the children of stories and the Fairlanders, who let them get out and escape their torment. But that's getting ahead of ourselves still. I just wanted to skip ahead so that everybody was aware that this is still, at the end of it all, about fighting cancer, about fighting the Unweaver. Exactly, Damon. So, from there, we set out to find the 3 other tombs. The Tomb of Contrite, the Tomb of, I never remember its name, and the Tomb of Sin.
Tomb of Truth, or have we already had that one?
I had not said that one. I did say Sin. Yes, the Temple of Truth. From there, and oddly enough, the truth was, as I said, obfuscated. They were all hidden by a traitor among the High Council. However, the children all thought that it was the knights who were using magic to obfuscate this, especially since the shadows were doing their best to turn the children against the knights, and vice versa.
Yes, I believe this was also about the time that we were introduced to the Tomb Lord, Morcus Dreg. Right.
Yes, but we'll get to him later because there is one more thing that I do want to mention before that. Because this is where roleplay came in. So I definitely want to mention that. It's that they actually went and they hunted for 3 tombs that were hidden on the Sim in the realm of the Amethyst Rift. And it was programmed that after some digging, it would be unearthed. And the children only found and uncovered 2 before it got too late and they decided to go to bed. So the shadows, who had been meeting in secret every night, said, let's go find that other tomb for ourselves. And so they did. And again, the children had no idea that this was going on. So they had no idea they had rivals. So, and this is the interesting part. This is where one of the children who just so happened to be exploring that night, where alone, just wandered in right as Arnold was and Rain were unearthing the Tomb of Sin. So she actually caught the shadows in the act for the first time and was able to identify them. And that's the one who just blushed in chat. Yes, completely unplanned. That's how the role play happens. Because it just happens. If you're there, you can get involved. Simple as that. So she and Arnold had a little bit of a meeting where he tried to get her to go away. But then he seemed to guide her inside when she insisted upon going in. Vicky might not remember this, but Arnold actually said to get behind him when the others looked like they were going to tie her up. And it was actually his idea first for them to say, well, the horn isn't here anyways, and why don't we just go on our way and let Damon here take her back home? And Damon went with that idea quickly, made it sound like his own idea even. So it was that roleplay just happened sometimes. And it became integral to the story because she was able to out Damon to the rest of the group as acting extremely suspicious, and as well as identifying 3 of the other shadows. And yes, Damon did try to gaslight her, but too much had happened for her to believe that. She saw through his lies, and though she was very nervous, both IC and OOC, to thinking that she might ruin things, but let me tell you right now, you cannot ruin this. It's roleplay. Unless you're actively trying to ruin the roleplay, you probably can't. So, what happened next is that she reveals her truth the next day, which was the meeting, where we gathered together and we shared all of our thoughts, all the facts, and everybody tried to get on the same page at the same time. This was the time that Arnold was thrown out of the camp, and where most figured out that he was a bad guy, so to speak. Yes, Damon was playing one of our shadows, and he was playing them quite well at the time. Nobody had even suspected him. Nor did anybody suspect Professor Niche Quinn, who showed up at the party and even chastised some of the children for using for society funds without the proper forms from being one as well. There are quite a few shadows among the society. But again, that's getting ahead of ourselves. But in order to fully understand everything that was happening, you have to understand these things. And so it was at the meeting, or just before it, Professor Quinn took away Lady Vivian, who had started to form a bond with the children. And that was the last thing that he wanted. Would anybody else like to speak here and give my voice a small break and say what happened next?
Yes, indeed, I can do that.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, well, I think this was the moment where we had the Tomb Lord enter and upset the knights a little by being there and kind of caused the knights to accuse everyone else of perhaps being like the Tomb Lord, because they also had taken relics from tombs without asking. So we were reaching something of a low point perhaps at that point. And as a result, was this the point where the Central Market took place? I think this is the Central Market.
Yes, the Centaur Market. You are getting a little ahead. So
I do apologize.
At the meeting, one other child had discovered something in the tomb that everybody else had overlooked. That was actually Nikki. Another one of the children who just so happened to go exploring the tombs. And without that, we wouldn't have known that Morkish Dreg, who has shown up in many of our stories as a greedy trader, had gotten the stone before the shadows and before even the children. So, and he was going to auction it off in Ostera at an auction the next day. So, knowing this, go ahead, Connor. The next day, because we were also assuming that now that we knew we had enemies, they might have planted that particular piece of evidence. So, just to be safe, the children went to the Centaur Market. Go ahead, Connor.
Yes, indeed. The children went to the Centaur Market, and I believe, was it Vicky and Nikki who found Kale there? I was not present at this point, but I believe that's what I was told. Yes, so the Centaur Market was, we were out of character. We were supporting a new role-playing group who were running a Centaur Market with fortune tellers and fish stalls and very few nuts, I must say. I spent quite some time asking for nuts and found very few. However, what was found there was, as I said, Kale was discovered there, and also I came across Lilith, who had been, I believe, kidnapped on perhaps the first or second day of our role-playing adventures. And First day, yes. And I was able to drop some extremely subtle hints that caused the young explorers to rescue Lilith and make sure that she made her way back to camp once again, which was quite a relief. And after that, I believe it was time for the auction. And so at this point, I don't believe the knights were aware of the additional information that had come to light about the fractal. And as a result, there was something of a conflict, I would say. The knights believed that they were very much in the right, and absolutely the relics of their history, the relics of the temples and so forth must be kept with the knights, that the young explorers had Early on in the adventure, the young explorers had committed to doing research on behalf of the knights and being squires of sea, and not at any point touching or picking up or interacting with anything, just scanning them and observing them and making notes. So when the knights discovered that the young explorers had removed some segments of the horn, they were equally upset with the explorers as they were with the shadows, somewhat misjudged, I would say. And as a result, we had this situation where the auction had 3 different kiosks, one for the shadows, one for the knights who protect the rift, and one for the young explorers. And each side had to call for support, and it became somewhat heated, I would say. Many of the young explorers, it seems, were not aware that it would take the knights quite some time to return back to the rift. And as a result, they felt that the knights should just trust them completely. And, yes. What would your perspective on this be, Strifeclaw?
Well, I would point out that the shadows had been telling, unbeknownst to everybody else, the knights were being informed by the shadows that the fractal had told the children that in order to find the last of them, that they needed to open the portal. The very portal that they were sworn to keep shut. And the children had no idea that the shadows had outed them in this way. And so when the knights accused them of ambition and such things, they thought they were in the clear. So, in truth, the shadows had once again set the Fairlanders against each other.
Yes, so this was quite a low point in the story, I would say. And in the evenings, I should mention, I was working as the emotional support squirrel for many of the after-hours campers, and quite a few confused and hurt feelings that evening that I was hopefully able to somewhat smooth over. Perhaps not, but it seemed a low point in the story, that we can say that.
Lynx, go ahead.
The auction. I noticed that when Arnold was saying that while these factions are scrambling, and he was right about that, and then someone from the shadow says, "Oh, we're not scrambling. They were, but we were just sitting there, just watching them tearing themselves apart. We were just having fun watching on the sidelines." Well, that's when Lynx got really angry with the group and saying that, "Hey, wait a minute, stop this mess. We need to start working together." Anyway, this whole scenario reminds me of real life, of factions and all squabbling with each other. The governments and non-profits and stuff like that, on cancer research and stuff like that. So that just reminds me of the real life fights that we have all the time. So
Yes.
So that's just my input on the thing.
Mm-hmm. And that was actually central to the decision of Arnold to, and here's something that is a little bit of fun. OOC, we thought that Loki was going to use Marcus Drag to host the auction. But seeing that that wasn't that, and as I was away at the Teagle thing, because water, I'm not crossing it. I was not going to go all the way to Astera. So since I couldn't get there, Arnold actually stepped up and said, all right, I'm running this. So the shadow, who nobody trusts, walks up and says, okay, yeah, I'm running this. Don't worry, I could be impartial because I don't care, is pretty much what I got from the logs of it later. So Arnold steps up to run the auction, and he sees to it that all the kiosks are into 3 different groups to actually encourage dissension between the groups, because the children no longer trusted the knights. The knights no longer fully trusted the children. Neither of those 2 groups knew that they had reason to distrust each other now, and they set about proving it by not working together. The shadows also happened to kidnap the rest of the auction ears, all the other auction bids. It pretty much was just one auction for one item, and the shadows were just playing it up and handing it up, and it was, reading it back, it was hilarious. At least to me. But, yeah, when it got to the point where the good guys were fighting amongst themselves, that was the low point of the story, and it was actually tying directly into the story, because, again, when this began, the Unweaver had convinced the neighbors of the Amethyst Rift to trick them, attack them, and conquer them for him. It's when Fairlanders fight each other that the Unweaver wins. And as such, we were able to illustrate it, just how easy it is for the Unweaver's servants, so to speak, or for greed to get in the way, and for competition to set each other apart when we're all one team. So that was where I would say that a heavy lesson was shown within roleplay. Yes. And so...
Yes, indeed. I would also add that the knights did somewhat have a point in what they were arguing. They were stating that for generations that they had been the protectors of the rift and the relics and the shrines and so forth. And as knights with armor and swords and horses and so forth, they were best placed to rightfully continue that role, and that they had shown some degree of trust and belief in the young explorers and declared them to be squires and so forth. And so they pledged that if they won the auction, then they would delay or completely hold off the destruction of the fractal and give the young squires a chance to prove themselves and provide evidence and so forth. But instead, the young explorers insisted that the knights had to trust them and not the other way around, and that the knights had to be the ones who supported their bid, and that the explorers from outside of the rift should be the ones who kept the relics, rather than the ones who believed themselves to be the natives of that land. So there was definitely a point there to be made, especially as in the morning it was discovered that the shadows had in fact broken into the camp, because it turned out that the security in the camp was actually a small child and some canvas that could be cut from the rear. So it was not much of a job for the shadows to steal horn from them rather than from the heavily armed knights. However, as we know, the shadows have been working behind the scenes to sow discontent within the ranks. So this is yet again another example of how misinformation and some kind of various real world things can be read into what happens during. Excuse me, I'm reading chat and being amused. So Indeed, yes. So the low of the argument the night before became an even lower low as it was discovered that the horn had been stolen. And so the children had put all that money and all those donations into winning the horn, and it had once again gone. So, shall I pass back for you, Stritheclaw?
Yeah, because everybody at this point had forgotten or not even noticed that event, even from the shadows, had raised 240,000 linden. Everybody was so icily upset by turning against one another that they didn't even realize that they had nearly raised a gold level in a single hour without music and competing with Teagle as an event. So they didn't even know how proud of them that fantasy was during this time, because the plan worked a little too well. Arnold's plan to turn you guys against each other worked OC and IAC. Anyways, from there, Tepic was robbed in the night by Whisper, who you might remember was another fox who Tepic had tried to befriend. He knew that he was touched by the Unweaver, and he was trying to save him. However, Arnold, Whisper, and Rainer the Fox, who had been in the tomb that Vicky had seen, attacked him in the night and captured him, stole his horn, and left him tied and bound up. He was left, however, with several notes and little pieces of information that could help them chase them down. So rather than instantly succeeding and or failing, the children had a chance when they discovered Tepic the next morning to chase after the shadows. And what a chase it was. We ran from the Amethyst Rift over the light bridges, which was terrifying for those who are afraid of heights and people who are afraid of water, like myself, looking down going, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Yes. And from there we went to Milfo, the future place. Sorry, the person who created that, I cannot pronounce that to save my life. Can anybody else? Please? Okay. Yeah, I don't think anybody can pronounce it. That's it. At least on my
I wasn't there, so I'm not aware of what the actual name was. If someone could write it down, I could give it a stab.
Okay.
Nifluman.
I challenge everybody to try to start saying that.
I am not either when I try to stab at that name.
I would say Nifluman.
Nifluman, that sounds so much better.
Nifluman.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay, now that we have that out of the way, ignoring all the water that was on the side of me the entire time in those tight corridors, we made our way through it to the next realm where the clue had been told us to go. The clue had been from Damien's notebook and left by Arnold, who for some reason had apologized for capturing and beating up Tepic, while the others were gloating about the prizes that they would get for this. Okay. Some notorious arc? Close enough. In any case, they found him hiding behind the scaffolding, and there's only one place where scaffolding is in the sim. So it was kind of a hunt, except you're looking for people and you don't know exactly what they look like necessarily. So we actually passed our quarry, and we turned back and headed towards them when Softpaw said that they realized where that scaffolding was. We surrounded Damien, and eventually because we realized that he was touched by the Unweaver and not working of his own free will, put him to sleep so that we could help cure him later. But yes, Tepik, who had been beaten up in the night before, was quite angry and rugby tackled Damien to prevent him from escaping from being surrounded. We took their note, which led to the next person, who it said would be near a windmill. And of course, on the Isles of Terran, there's definitely a giant windmill in the center. And so we rushed all the way to the next area, which of course is a bunch of islands floating over water. Why? Just why? Yes, Lynx didn't like the heights, and I didn't like. Yes, I didn't hear you offer Avariel. So yes, we rushed up this, jumping from island to island until we reached the center, where Leo who had been at the auction, was flying just next to the windmill. He was one of the Boo-Boo Owls who had forgotten who he was. Avaria brought him down, and after a bit of a tense interaction, he too was put to sleep and captured. Yes, I did not do much in this particular part except to lead the way and be a rallying point that everybody could easily see and follow. Yes, you were standing on it, Avariel. Yes, I know my part in this, most of this is to be a rallying point that everybody can see. So we kept running forward, taking our time. I would often stop to react to the world as if seeing it for the first time, because in some ways I was. Up next, we came to the yarn world, which, of course, Kitty, I want to tear that thing apart. It's just featherfall. Yeah, I love that sim. I want to dig my claws into it. Yarn. What do you want from me? I'm a kitty. In any case, from there, we found the next person on the list, who was not completely corrupted. She was just a forgotten. She didn't even completely know why she was watching the yarn to probably disrupt it, and other evil plans that they had, which by now have been shot as well. Last thing we need was the yarn of time unraveling. In any case, she knew that the jig was up and surrendered her information, and because she wasn't completely evil at the time, she gave us our next clue, which was where Itzy had happened to capture Lilith the night before, which I had gone out of my way to discover, but none of the others had. So I had gone around scenting. And if you want to find somebody, message me. I'll tell you who you have to contact, and you can actually roleplay searching for them and the possibility you can actually find them, which has in the past happened. I am more than happy to assist the roleplay to happen as roleplay. So, they came to Itzy, who tried to escape rather quickly. And yes, Softpaw, that is the picture that I was having in mind. And as she fled, Avariel actually caught up with her. Avariel of the Wind was the most important guardian of this particular year, as tonal resonance, as you heard, was so important to the Amethyst Rift. And tonal resonance implies air. Which is why she didn't get nearly as tired as the rest of us, and why she had so much more static floof. Oh yes, Itzy did not expect a flying horsey, so she, with some honor to her, gave you her note. That or she was just trying to subtly give that to you so you'd leave her alone and she could get away, which is way more likely. They're quite manipulative. In any case, the horn was what we needed to get to, because we had learned that just 3 pieces of the horn, which is what they had, could still be utilized to open a portal to the realm of the Unweaver. And we certainly didn't want that to happen. The next note was just a drawing, because Whisper is a mute, and he doesn't know how to write. And so it was just a picture of a pawn slowly turning into a black king, which was the hint that we needed to go to the next world, which chess world. So yeah, we went to chess world. Yeah, but don't ask me to pronounce that. Jadub, Jadub, Jadouble, chess world. We're going with that. Zadub? Okay, sure. Right.
Well, that chess place, this is really where Strife calls, and my height and water roleplay gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm. I fell in.
Yeah, I was saying that you fell in, and here I was, so happy, finally, water. Go on, and then
yeah, the water guardian loves the water. The earth guardian fears it for reasons that will actually come up again later, but was told fully in last year's story. For anybody who was paying attention to last year. And so we made our way. We found Whisper, who managed to get away, but not before dropping a note. It seemed that their eyes had turned red, and they were very changed from what they once were. Rather than being a small, innocent-looking child, they looked wicked. And so they got the note that they had dropped. It was from one of the members of the High Council, congratulating them and saying that they were no longer forgotten. They were now a full-fledged shadow, actually touched by the Unweaver. But not in a good way at all, no. In fact, his touch is never good, as we all know. The real Whisper would never want that. In any case, they made their way to the south part of Adragonus, and though this was not known at the time, it was misspelled on the note. And that's important for later. Because Arnold brought it to the place that was misspelled. Hey, you followed the order. But we'll get to that. Typos for the win, for us at least. Meanwhile, everybody went forward and found that it was Professor Quinn who had spoken to them previously, but not very much. Everybody was expecting Kanergak or just someone else to be the final boss, the final villain behind it all. The one who had manipulated them, the one who had hacked their devices so that they couldn't translate everything, the one who had manipulated them, lied to them. It was a rather lanky-looking professor instead. A lanky-looking professor who was backed up by a massive, ancient, undead dragon lich, which landed behind him to the shock of everybody. Yeah. Yes, a massive dragon. Ancient. Yeah, he was absolutely friendly. He walked up and looked at everybody and said, "Wait, don't I know you? Didn't I see you last year? Aren't we friends? Hey, Ned Meowin," which is Strifeclaw when they were with the Unweaver, as that was established last year. So he recognized me. The only thing that I did during this entire trek was being recognized. And so, because they recognized me and because everything else, they flew off and just left us there. Yes, a senile dragon caused by the Realm of Forgotten Stories. So, yeah, he's quite senile. Undead senile dragon. But hey, it makes him kind of nice. So he flew off, and the professor, cursing Arnold, who had failed to show up with the final piece, ran into the goo, and not knowing that it wasn't water, will never be seen again. Unfortunately, everybody else chased after them, not knowing that it wasn't also water. Yeah, I am a girl. Glad you finally noticed. Yeah. And so it was that they had 2 of the pieces back, which is the 2 pieces they had before. And this is the last part that I'll take until I let Connor take over again. They made their way back with the pieces. It was a long journey, or at least that's what we said. We all teleported back. For time. They found Arnold was standing over a bridge, looking over it, feeling absolute regret for his actions. And it was here that we found out that he was under the Unweaver's touch, but not directly. He still had his free will. He still had his own thoughts, his own feelings. And he just could not disobey an order from his witch, who was also a corrupted shadow now. And so, obediently, he had to follow direct orders. And unfortunately, that made him have to obey and do terrible things. And so he was thinking about ending it all, and so he would never hurt anybody ever again. And this was the darkest point of any story that we've ever had, but it's something that Xander said that caught my attention one year. And it's that people were not talking about cancer. They were not talking about the sickness. And in silence does sickness, and silence does the Unweaver win. But yes, that was why this happened and why we didn't sugarcoat it at all. Why Arnold was thinking of jumping off the bridge and ending his own life. Because that is something that people who suffer with the Unweaver are sometimes tempted to do, rather than continue their treatments or continue everything else. It's just a dark moment, and it was real. However, like the heroes that the Fairlanders are, they saw that he was suffering, and like the heroes they are, they helped him. They saved him. They talked him down off of the ledge, as any good caregiver would do. And that in that moment, that's when they truly became heroes. In the future, I hope that because they experienced doing that in a situation like that, they'll be ready if it ever happens again. Exactly, it was. But sometimes you have to go through the lowest of lows in order to reach the highest of highs. Because Arnold then, after some talk and with some encouragement, he was able to find a way to get around his direct order that he could not give the horn to the children or their allies, to prevent him from ever giving it back, just in case he was tempted. He could give it to their enemies, though, and last night the knights had become enemies. So in fact, yes. In fact, they had given him the hope to figure it out. And so he ran off to retrieve the horn from the place that he had put it, in the wrong realm, while everybody else waited at camp to hear the good news that Canergak and the Gadgeteer had... Actually, I will leave this part to Connor, because from here on in, I do not need to give any input that none of the rest of us would know. Go ahead, Connor.
Hello? Okay. So, I will interject here to say that we've been having, as acting emotional support squirrel, I have been doing some emotional supporting during this story, and we've had some discussions behind the scenes to make sure that in future we come up with some sort of way to allow people who need them to access trigger warnings or content notes or so forth about potentially upsetting situations, because yes, it's not ideal that we did have some people who were rather upset by what happened. Yes, so rest assured, we are learning lessons as we go along. So yes, what was discovered at this point in the tale was that while everyone was heroically comforting Arnold and becoming heroes and so forth, meanwhile, the experts from the council, from the organization, the society, had cracked the code, or in fact discovered that, I think, were the shadows involved with this as well, with interfering with the translations, or was that someone else?
Yes, that was absolutely the shadows. That was absolutely Professor Quinn.
Aha. So as a result, Professor Quinn, who was working with the shadows secretly, had made it so that previously all the translations of the messages within the tombs were somewhat garbled and they did not have the full information. But at this point, they cracked the code, and it was finally possible for the messages in the tombs to be read. And due to various members of the Young Explorers, the knights were apologized to and befriended again, and I believe some of the people involved were Star and Robbie, perhaps some others, and they very kindly led the knights into the scene, who were able to see in person the evidence and be humbled to learn that in fact they represented the Empire, the bad guys in their story, and not the Six that they had believed themselves to be descended from. And as a result, they pledged that they would do everything they could to help, but decided that the squires of sea, the young explorers, were best placed to research further and find all of the remaining tombs, secret rooms within those tombs and so forth, and to fully translate everything. And doing that the best, I think, although everyone was a team effort, but putting most effort into making sure that all of his fellow explorers would have the information they needed was Lucci, who was extremely helpful in providing numerous reports of many kinds, translations, notes, pictures, all sorts, and I was helping as admin to pin those up upon the notices of the group and allow everyone to read them. So some fantastic teamwork there from all involved. And so at this point, they learnt more and more overnight, until we were finally at the point where they knew everything that was needed to do. And I will pass back to you, Strivecore, and I hope that your voice is feeling a little rested now.
Yes, I'm sure you can tell the strain at this point, but Lynx actually had something she wanted to say.
Sorry, the chat is kind of funny. In that tomb, that night, when the night we were reconciling with the knights, when Sir Samuel came in with a sword drawn, Lynx saw that sword and asked politely for him to put it back up, and he said that he was told that there might be a monster in here. And Lynx looked at him and said, there's no monsters in here but us. Meaning that the monsters that time were living inside us. We were becoming monsters that time, during that divisions.
Exactly.
So that's why she said there were no monsters but us. That's it.
And you were completely right. Which was how the shadows had manipulated events into turning the Fairlanders again against themselves. First with the Empire, and a long, long time ago with Ninmount, though they never admitted to this. I'm just going to tell you now, they were actually involved in that, despite their denials of it. And with other things that manipulated the Fairlanders from their neighbors into turning against them. And just as now, the Fairlanders with the children were turning against the knights. Except that this time it was the other way around as far as numbers went. And so it was that in friendship they decided to come together and perform the ritual that would set the children free. For the truth had been revealed now fully, that it wasn't just that they had been, the great empire had been conquerors. It was also that they were, that the children had been ripped apart and formed into one, the fractal, which we had already discovered to an extent, but that they had a piece of the horn, and we had to get that piece back, or else when we tried to open a portal, it would open a portal to the realm of forgotten stories, a terrible place of the Unweaver. And so began the work through the night by our gadgeteer and everybody, by Kanergak, by our scientists. And they prepared a way for Xander to use the Snowfire Crystal once again to power the joy, the music, and everything. And here is where they started. Yesterday, right by the portal. They gathered, they danced. Xander had a very, very heart-touching story to share. In fact, he made us cry at the very beginning of the set. So that was amazing. Let me share you all something right quick. It's something that Loki posted. Rather than tell you what happened, here is the actual tweet, the movie, that you can watch, and that Xander gets to tell you basically what happened. So that's going to let me rest my voice for at least a minute or two. Or Connor, or Lynx, or Softpaw even, you can type what you like here to continue this part.
Type or talk?
Either one. I just really need to rest my voice.
Okay, very well. Well, I assume people are watching the video, though. Perhaps my talking is interfering with their ability to hear Xander, so perhaps we should type momentarily.
I just wish that we could have put it on the screen behind us at the same time. That would have been awesome. I have the video going myself at this point, so I know how much longer it has. Okay, I'm going to start from here. So as you saw, there was a lot that happened during that. They summoned the crystal, who it turned out was the daughter of the emperor. She had not been corrupted. So, or rather, she had been uncorrupted at some point in the healing room that was obfuscating their scanners, so they never actually got to hear this part of the lore either. So let me just tell you about it. Since the Empire had been affected by the Unweaver and making them into conquerors when they did not used to be, and using the Rift Gate to travel to other realms and steal and rob and sack them, at some point they used the healing room in order to get to the daughter of the Empire, and so she became one of the 6 who stood against him, and was able to help the other 6 in ways to fight the rest of the Empire, teaching them their secrets and telling them their plans, things like that. She became part of the resistance. So, during that time afterwards, once we had she was summoned, and she saw that one of the knights was there, thinking them her enemies still after all this time, despite the fact of her own birth and who her father was. But he made it clear that they renounced their past ways, and that he had grown up in the Rift with honor and with dignity. And as I said, that was kind of the Unweaver's trick to make these Empire people who are evil completely slowly over time forget that in terms of mockery of themselves. But he thought it'd be even funnier if they would be good people with chivalry and honor, believing in something that's false, protecting the secret, because they thought that they were stopping a great evil when in fact they were stopping a good from ever happening. And so, the truth coming out, he said that they would be a knight of the Amethyst, not of the Empire. A warrior of Amethyst, as she had been. And so she gave the piece of the horn to Samuel, and he reformed the horn. And as you saw on the video, they kept blowing the horn, slowly bringing out the spirits, so that they were waiting on this side of the portal, just waiting, no longer trapped in the fractal, for the portal to open and for them to fully pass through. And as you saw, that's exactly what happened. And so they made their way on and disappeared. As another Children of Stories to another, they thanked each other. For as I said, during this time, they might not have started as Children of Stories, but they became one through their actions, through their deeds, through their heroics, And that was always the point. We can all be heroes. And sometimes it takes us going through some of the lowest of low points. And sometimes we don't always get advance warning about it. That's true. I'll give you that. And yes, next year is going to be a much lighter and sillier story where we don't have as many dark moments because of it. But
we said that last year.
We said
that last year.
Oh yes, that was another time that it was dark. But yes, go ahead, Connor.
I was saying the same thing. We promised that last year.
Yes, we promised that last year. And we delivered. It was lighter-hearted the entire time. They weren't always at each other's throats. It just still had a lowest low point. Yes, nobody died this year. In fact, the Unweaver specifically said no martyrs. Because he noticed that everybody rallied when they had a martyr. He didn't want that this year. So there was a specific order given to Arnold and the others. No martyrs, no deaths. Don't give them that. Your job is to obfuscate. Your job is to lie. Your job is to prevent them from discovering the truth. Death would just bring more interest here. You want them to be so angry and so upset that you just give up and walk away. And that's all you had to do. You already won, technically, a long time ago. The only way that the truth would happen is if everybody the only way to win was to make sure nobody gave up, that everybody just kept going. And also, during that event, you might not know it, but we hit over 1 million lindens. Actually, we hit 1.5 million lindens at the finale, which is a fair record for events that are just 2 hours long. Yeah. Yes, Tepic. With roleplay, you don't always have a say in what you're expecting to happen. It just happens.
I feel sorry for Oso. He is being inundated, flooded with remotes. He's been getting remotes from people. And he's been just stuffing it in and stuffing it in and stuffing it in.
Yes, he does, and he's so happy to do it. But yeah, I feel sorry for him too, because he gets. There are 84 people in that sim at one point, filled up. So there were times that nobody could get in the sim, even though they wanted to be there to help us.
Yes, and a remote in this case is somebody sending Linden dollars to a volunteer for them to tip the kiosk in their place to make a donation that they cannot make by way of getting into the sim. That is what a remote is.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
These stores are so powerful. I want to say, this is my first year in the Children of the Stories as a full Watcher Guardian. I started this kind of back in 2014, just listening to the stories and whatnot. And this is where Link's first bought a half of the Watcher Stone without realizing what, excuse this pun, Stripe Claw, what on earth it is. So it kept being called back to the Earthstone every year since, pulling poor Link's along with it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I'd always had plans for that.
Yeah, well, poor Lynx. Well, the year before, Lynx finally, she's like, okay, I've had enough of this pulling crap. Found herself with Stripeclaw alone in a room. And Lynx decided to ask Stripeclaw, well, what is this stone? Well, Stripe looked at it and said, well, that's part of the water stone. No wonder why you're getting called into this.
And everybody had forgotten that we had not seen the water or fire guardians since the first story. It had just been me and Avariel, so there had been a secret story for the guardians searching for the other guardians since the very first one.
Well, last year was very emotional for me. Lynx was having a real low period. I was kind of having a low myself because of isolation from COVID in a way. So that's not a real good situation. But she was having a low period. She knew that finally it was part of the water stone. The Unweaver was hounding her and stuff like that. So, at the end, she wanted to find the other half of the stone. But she had to go through so many trials and tribulations. And even then, her pride got into her way. And so at the end, her pride fell very flat, very hard, like in here. Sorry for another pun, guys. Like a stone. Yeah, like a stone. And this was in the land of forgotten stories.
Yep.
Of places. Fortunately, she hid the stone, so the stone itself was not in that land. Now, all she had was a fake to fool the Unreaver, just in case. They asked her, well, are you going to help Nat recover? You going to help Nat recover? And Lynx sat down at one of the tables and just said, I don't have the stone with me. I'm helpless with this.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
And then she just got this too much despair on her that she just finally just, and I'm going to have to say this. Hate to say this. Her own will went to the Unweaver's side, pledged herself to the Unweaver, and for a very short time, even became one of his shadows.
This is true. This is absolutely true.
But it was
a transformative year.
It was very transformative for me. And when she got out of it and whatnot and tried to remember who Lynx was, Water Guardians, and whatnot, who Miranda was, the original Water Guardian. When Lynx and Miranda together helped putting the water stone together finally.
Mm-hmm. And that was
Miranda gave Lynx the stone and the title. Lynx was speechless.
Yes.
And I was speechless too. And I also want to thank several characters of Nat and Bisbee and the what's her face, the coyote as
Medicine
well.
Bear. She was just known as the Medicine Bear.
Yes, and well, also the coyote.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Kiaya.
Kiaya, thank you. So I want to thank all of the role players of this role play. And I also want to really add a personal note.
Go ahead.
I lost my brother to cancer in 2017. It has hit hard on me. I learned the day after my mom's death that he had cancer. 2 months later, he died from it. It has hit hard on me. Thank you, Damon. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, all of you. So ever since, it's just been an emotional roller coaster for me.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I wanted to touch on, is that there's many reasons for the Children's Stories role plays are so successful, despite their low points, despite the horrors that they go through, despite everything. And it's this, it gives us a way to fight back. It gives us a way to fight against the Unweaver. It gives us a way to punch him in his smug face. Not directly, but thwarting his plans, helping people, healing them, talking that person off the cliff, talking that person, helping those people get through their cancer treatments through the portal, helping the chief get better and restored to a good person, helping. It's always about helping someone. It's always about making a difference. And if there's one thing that I would say that ties our stories together, it's that we care. And we care about each other, and we take the time to get involved. We take the time to be part of a story. So yes, I know that it gets dark at times, but the Unweaver is dark. We shouldn't deny it. We should help ourselves through it. And yes, that's why we have an emotional support squirrel. That's why we have Old Mother Merritt there to tell us her stories. That's why we have these things waiting at camp, so that you can get through what is an emotionally traumatic time at times. Perchance. Because often, if it was just a lighthearted story, it wouldn't touch you the way that it does. It wouldn't let you feel like you've made a difference. It wouldn't let you feel like you've defeated something. I've been told several times that it's been life transforming and that it saved a few lives, because the role play gave them an outlet when they most needed it, when their lives were dark, and when they needed someone. And that's really what happened last year. Somebody told me that they were at a low point, and without the story, they would have actually done that. And that's one of the reasons I made sure that that happened this year. Because it does happen. And you can save people just with role play. And I wanted people to know that. That you can make a difference. You can save someone just by being there for them. Just by having a moment in time, a story to share, where you can fight back and you can make a difference. And that's what it's all about. That's what it's always been about. And I think that that's why we're so successful year after year, and why we've grown exponentially every year. Because everybody needs that outlet. Everybody needs a story that they could get involved with, that they can make differences with, where they can find the shadows hiding in a tomb, where they can find somebody at a market who was lost, that every year any one of you can make a difference. Even Nisha, I believe, got involved because she or they were wandering around, saw us running around, came and looked for the key, and they found the key to the Boobo Owl's thing. They were worried that they would ruin the role play, and I told them, no, you're just part of the story now. Go ahead. Go open the door. And they did. And they've been joining us ever since. And that's all you have to do. Just get involved. That's all it's ever been. And I think that actually brings us to the end of this year's story, except for epilogue notes. Connor, is there anything you'd like to add? Anyone at this point?
Are we moving on next to discussing some of the behind the scenes of the story, or I don't want to skip ahead?
No, we could totally talk about the behind the scenes stuff. Go ahead.
Okay, well, there we go then. So to reveal some of the behind the scenes non-player character performance team secrets, I wasn't just working nights as a support squirrel. I was also working a particular night. My typist, my kind keyboard caddy, was also behind the keyboard of Sir Samuel of the Rift, and quite often having no idea what was going on because I was only able to run one view at once, so I would stay carefully logged in, standing around waiting for things to happen, and yes, at some point someone would come up and tell me I had to go somewhere, and I'd go there and no one would explain things to me, so I would be very annoyed and walk off, which luckily was in character. And thank you for everyone who came and apologised to Sir Samuel, because, well, Sir Samuel was a writer here because he had absolutely no idea what was happening. So, yes. And the number of times that he would arrive and ask what was going on, and be told that he had to wait for someone to explain it to him because no one else could do it, or everyone would be talking about some other thing, and he would rightly feel disrespected as a knight and leave again. It's in terms of experiencing the story, it was oddly relaxing at times. I had really no idea what was going on. Yes.
It's made you perfect to play Samuel.
Absolutely. He knew his mythology, and he knew what people told him, and often people assumed he was reading from a script and didn't need to be told things. And no. Also, earlier in the week, I was performing Lady Vivian as well. Lady Vivian from the High Council, and she had been told that she should arrive and act solely as an observer, and we knew the backstory and so forth. And I'd been given a story that she could perhaps read at some point about the families and so forth. That was all I had. And but she was an authority figure from the High Council. So when during the story time, the performer who was playing Professor Crackpotter had a technical problem and was crashed and was unable to log in for quite some time. So as a result, Lady Vivian had to suddenly realise she had a duty of care and to act as suddenly as the supply teacher and call everybody to. So I was just ad-libbing all sorts of things about the safety procedures and the muster point and the paperwork that was needed. I had literally just expected her to stand in the corner and glare. And so very quickly, having done that, I was just ad-libbing what she'd said. She was saying, I have to deal with all the incident reports. And then gradually I decided that actually she was... She enjoyed reading the incident reports, and that she actually decided she was the hero in an exciting story from, I did know from her backstory that her family disapproved of adventure and adventurers. So as a result, she was only able to read the history and find romance in the history and read the incident reports and read the records and find romance in them. So she believed herself to be in charge of everyone and the hero of the story and so forth. And it was quite hilarious at times. I would stumble into a tomb or a temple, have no idea what I was doing there, absolutely no idea what was happening, and I just ad-lib some things about oh yes, I can help, yes, definitely. I think at one point TC came to talk to her, and yes, of course, she was actually, if you talk to her, she'll talk to you. So people were standing there going, oh, we've got an NPC here giving us important information. So she would gradually tell them that yes, you could absolutely translate the rest of this, and yes, if she pulled some leverage, pulled some strings, and used some leverage that she had in the linguistics historical linguistics department, then very quickly, perhaps within 2 or 3 weeks, you could have a team here, and once the peer review system had been done, the paper would be done, and they would know what the translation was. Yes, in fact, all I'd intended for her to do was go into a tomb with a cup of tea and spill it on the ground, so that she never had to actually go into a tomb again, realizing that she was more of a liability than anything. Yes, I can also reveal that later in the midweek, I was told with no warning that there had been an idea behind the scenes that perhaps Lady Vivian could turn out to be a secret villain and be the one that betrayed everyone. However, at that point, I had been... yes, as Loki said, yeah. And at that point, I had actually been having the situation where I was being the emotional support squirrel outside of hours, but during hours, I was... Sitting there just when anyone new arrived, I was being very kind to them and saying, oh yes, well, I'm sure your fellow explorers here will help you out and they'll explain things to you. Yes, it's very good. Now let's see, can I give you something to do? So I was effectively acting as a kind of summer camp counselor or a brown owl from the Brownies or something like that kind of thing. And I felt that actually at that point, she had, if I'd been told early on that she was a secret villain, I would have been much more flattering to everyone. I'd have been Mrs. Coulter from His Dark Materials and so on. But as was, no, she believed that she was breaking the rules and she was becoming the heroine in a story with unicorns and knights and wonderful things. And she let her hair down and she broke rules and she did no paperwork. And then Professor Quinn turned up and things went very wrong for her and she was sadly sent away.
That is correct. Yeah, but Professor Quinn knew exactly how to shame her without making it look like he was being too awful by bringing up her father.
Yes, mainly because I suggested so in IMs.
Yes, that is true. But they didn't know that till just now.
Yes, indeed. Yes, occasionally there's things where we quickly IM the other and say, we've established the wrong thing. In fact, there was a point where in our backstage performance team, we'd been told that at some point we wanted to, by the end of the day, achieve a thing where that there were lights and portents happening in the air. And as a result, the knights would turn against everyone. And so I was there on hand as Sir Samuel, waiting for this to happen, waiting for these portents. And later, right at the last minute, when I'd just been saying what I believed was the right thing, I was suddenly urgently told in IMs that I needed to be saying the exact opposite of what I was saying. So I was saying quickly, because apparently Loki had been setting off various signs and portents all day, and none of the young scientists had thought to tell anybody about this. So the performers didn't know about this. And so as a result, we had to, very last minute, we had to call in Damocles, who just wrote in and said, something's happened off screen. And then I had to become the knight of, I was bridging the rift of exposition between what had been established and what we actually needed to say by just making up a large scripted thing on the spot.
Yeah, that was Loki's thing for not telling us. It was funny.
it was very amusing.
In any case, it worked out. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, roleplay is roleplay. It's even NPCs are people, so they don't have to follow a script, as far as I'm concerned. However, people react to certain things, and the Shadows had been planning to fake some extra portents, things like the book bleeding with Itzy, like I had said, to make things look like awful things were happening. I think you've covered all of the people that you played. Yes?
Yes, well, I was also playing Old Mother Merritt, who was the grandmother of Nat Merritt, my previous character. And yes, we'd kind of assumed that she would be tag teaming with me and providing a support role after hours as well. And however, having some difficulty running more than one client at once this year, had some freezing up at inopportune moments. So as a result, she only appeared a couple of times and was mostly involved with the role-playing classes. In fact, as I was hosting and providing role-playing classes and yes, introducing all of them, some of which were at 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning, finishing at about 4:20 in the morning for me, my ability to be doing all sorts of things outside of hours at the main roleplay was a little bit reduced. But I think it worked out because I was Lady Vivian for quite a lot of the early week and got people working together and did things like, yes, well, when Lady Vivian was, many of Lady Vivian's character developments were just because I'd accidentally walked the wrong way or accidentally jumped at the wrong time. And I thought, well, why has she done that? Oh, she's been overcome with joy. Or, oh, she's walked this way. She's walked into some mushrooms because she meant to walk out, but she came to these mushrooms. So it's so pretty. Perhaps instead of doing paperwork tonight, she'll instead get out a sketchbook and draw pictures of mushrooms instead. And yes, it's all happy accidents. We really had no idea what we were doing.
Honestly, you could sum up roleplay as, okay, there's a plan. What's the plan? Make it up as we go. Until we get to this point. Somehow, some way. I'm sure somebody will figure it out. Okay, let's do it. Yay!
I would say mud puddles. No, you don't have to explain every time you accidentally jumped, but it's a lot more fun if you do.
Yeah. So, there's another thing that was happening during this time. There were a lot of other people who were playing NPC roles. Cyan Reyna was playing some of the Shadows and some of the other NPCs. There was also Damon, who was technically playing, well, he was never an NPC. He was actually still a player in every way, shape, and form, except he was playing a Shadow. Let's see. Cyan Reyna was also playing Spalding, his uncle, with the sponsor with the society. Yes. Casa from last year and Lilith of this year. And Lilith Benda of this year. So yeah, they played 2 people named Lilith just to mess with people. They also played Leon, or Leo, and they also played, let's see, they just played a lot of Shadows and people from the SCE. Now, here's where I come in, because I have 150 alts, and I'm not kidding. I was playing the role of Damocles. So that might be a surprise to some to know that that was me behind that one. So we had Damocles. I was also Itzy. She's always fun to play. So I was a knight and I was a shadow. It's probably the only actually evil shadow among them from the start. I was also Professor Quinn. So, yeah, congratulations. I was also, and this is a surprise to no one from Babbage, Arnold. Go ahead, Saffia. Well, Arnold's...
I wondered if Quinn, Professor Quinn, was a reference to Xander's character in the Black and Mirror, Harland Quinn.
Professor Niche Quinn, Snow Quinn, in other words, was not a reference to anybody in particular, except for his own character within Second Life. He had already been a semi-villain in Babbage at one point. However, as everybody else returns at some point as the Children of Stories, this was a different version of him, because that version of him was not villainous on purpose. He was quite studious, tried to keep Variel's tower going, so he was quite different from this particular one. And moving back to Arnold, everybody who knows me, Beryl Strifeclaw, in Babbage knows that Beryl was first known as Arnold. So, yeah, that is Beryl, as they were before when they first came to Babbage. That depressed, that cynical, that just neurotic, and convinced that everything is out to destroy them and kill them and leave me alone. Yeah, they had trust issues.
I know a few people in real life with that kind of trust issues.
Yeah. And one thing about it is that you wouldn't know from listening to me, but Arnold's struggle is often my struggle. So that's one reason that I feel that such things need to be talked about, because otherwise how would you know that just by being together with each other, you are saving somebody's life, you are saving their sanity, you are helping them. Just by being part of the story, just by helping them also make a difference, which is why, as the kiosk hit 750,000 yesterday, they topped it up to 1 million. So that was from me. But it fit the story for it to be from them. So, same person. Except different person. So, yes, I think we've covered all the topics that I wanted to talk about, explaining the reason that things got dark. We expected it to. And, in fact, dealing with it is, and dealing with it together can help us deal with it when we encounter it in real life. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Samuel, Arnold, all of them, and what it meant to them, because it did mean that to them, and it meant it to me, because if you don't know, I'm a method actor. When I am Arnold, I literally feel everything that Arnold's going through. I literally feel Strifeclaw, whatever they're going through. So last year was really rough for me, because Strifeclaw was not in a good place, and in this year, well, Arnold's never in a good place. So, except for after they attacked Tepic, that this devastated them. So, yeah. Anyways, looking at the time, Saffia?
I want to say something about my background work.
Oh, go ahead.
When I am with the children anywhere, and if I am not with Strifeclaw at all, she wants me to make note cards afterward the chat and give them to her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reluctantly to do that because that is hard work, but I'm glad to do it nonetheless. To do so. Give her note cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, after a while, I was like, yeah, I'm glad to do so. It helps her to flesh, for all of us to flesh out the story and whatnot. Oh, Nat Merritt.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I think we've already gone over time, but unless Saffia is about to stop us, I don't see why not. Saffia?
Yeah, I was going to say the next event is at 4 p.m., but it's not taking place on this region, so we can move on. We can keep going. I'll have to slip out to do some admin stuff at about 3:45, but you're doing fine. You probably don't need me, but yeah, you have no hard stop today.
Very, very good then.
But I would like to say, I know you've already been incredibly generous in your own kiosks, but if you could drop a few little lindens in ours, there's a kiosk at the back. It would be really nice if you could drop a few lindens.
Yes.
Yes, that's the interview with Walton Wainwright and his partner Victor Eaton.
Over to me then?
Probably the 10th, I would think, or the 11th.
Go ahead.
Things are
It's
going
not.
on till the 9th.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I was still hearing Saffia. Yes, so my previous character, Nat Merritt, has been mentioned a couple of times already. And one of the reasons that StriveCorps asked me to be part of this discussion is so that I could talk from the perspective of a player. This was the first year I've been taking part in. Well, I've been role playing in Second Life I was role playing as Nat Merritt from 2009 onwards. Starting in New Babbage, also as part of the Goonies and so forth, and later on attending many Camp Hard Knock and community camp, summer camps, winter camps. I think one spring camp, was that? Maybe not. Anyway, I've been very heavily involved as a player in many role plays and got a great deal out of those role plays. And yes, much like StriveCorps, I am quite method in my role playing in that if my character is upset, then I am extremely upset, and if I'm happy, and so forth. I'm really experiencing what I'm experiencing. And as many of us were, I was having a very dark early 2020 last year, particularly by this time of year, that I'd been going through many difficult things up to that point. So playing Nat Merritt at the fair has always been, I was there for the Rickety Weasels. I was there for all of those, all through the time. And yes, it was to say that we don't plan things. Yes, when Nat Merritt died during last year's roleplay, every event that had just happened because I was acting in character. I was entirely acting. I knew how Nat felt. I knew what he would do in every situation, and I knew that Nat was aware of that, and that he would not. He was he was generally one to protect other people and to know that what people were doing was a mistake and try desperately to stop them and then get out of the way and warn people as much as possible before acting. But once he was upset to a certain degree, then he would probably act in a way that was not exactly rational. Particularly once he had been, Strifecore, would you like to give your perspective on the events that led up to Nat Merritt becoming injured?
Absolutely, I would, because this is one of the interesting things. Nat Merritt had decided in their infinite wisdom that they were going to offer themselves up as bait first to the child-eating owl woman. And instead of the small little mouse who could fit through the massive bars and just slip right through. Anyways, moving on from that silliness, they did this without thinking, because that is who they are. But
yeah, I would say to be fair to the character of Nat Merritt, he had been anticipating. It's kind of reverse metagaming because we'd already had a bail in jail. People were quite inclined to understand that when there was a cage, it was important to get in the cage, whether it made sense or not. And we'd already had a scene where everyone got inside the cage, and Nat had desperately tried to get them out of the cage, and then he'd been trying to get everyone to cover themselves with manure so that the witch wouldn't eat them, and he'd just been doing everything possible, and he got everyone to swear that nobody would be in that cage. And then when he'd had a bit of like my typist, like my kind keyboard caddy, Nat Merritt is autistic and has ADHD, and becomes overwhelmed and reacts as is natural in those situations. And his fight or flight tends to be rather than fight or flight, it's protect. It's kind of run in and not really think. And yes, no one knew what was happening at that stage, and then Loki was stuck having to roleplay the owl witch Nat in the cage for quite some time because nobody came to rescue Nat. We were starting to wonder whether they'd come eventually and Nat would be dead. Anyway, so after that, a series of unusual player decisions took place in which Kale decided to protect the witch from Nat and restrain him with talons and flames, which caused some great injury. I cannot hear you. Can anyone hear Strifeclaw? No, we can't hear you. I'll continue. And yes, she's crashed. Well, I'll go on then. Yes. So basically, we were then in the situation. So I'm the type of player. I know some of our number do keep character statistics. This is a difficult word to say. Character statistics. Yes, do keep character statistics at hand and have dice all the time. I only bring the dice out if I am critically injured. If I'm critically injured, then I will have some dice at hand and I will keep rolling to decide whether I've been injured or whether I'm doing well. And we did have situations where I became very critically ill, and some of the players who know me from New Babbage for a long time are aware that Nat Merritt previously did lose a leg in a roleplay because of being bitten by a chicken homunculus monster, and the actual wound was quite a minor one, but it is a Victorian setting, and he did feel that he wanted to be involved in the story. And being involved in the story meant other characters helpfully helping him while injured go into the sewers and fall in and get his wound in sewer water and so on. So we did end up in the circumstances where in the climax of that story he was having his leg amputated at the same time as the chicken turkey homunculus baby monster was being captured in a giant trap outside, which yes, now Merritt's quite good for giving the characters playing medics and doctors and surgeons things to do when everyone else is off having fun. And yes, so people aware of that might have been a little bit more cautious, but once again we did have the situation where Nat will always put other people's needs in front of his own. So as a result, when he was canonically unable to sit up on his own and needed to be supported and was in complete pain and was blacking out and things, all his friends very helpfully helped him to travel all the way across many sims throughout a perilous journey in which his player was saying things like, oh, I accidentally fell off there, but I'm not going to count that because I'd die if that was the case. So that was non-canon. And yeah, so then we arrived at the end. It was and before the final confrontation with corruption, we had a series of beds around us, and things were quite so bad. I was literally at the point where I was rolling every turn to decide if Nat was unconscious or not. And at that point, he was deliriously looking to the beds and wanting to lie in the beds. And all of his friends were very helpfully going, oh, no, 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 no. We can't let you miss the story. No, we're going to help you get in there. And can you speak now, Striveclaw? Seems not. Okay, so we then had a situation where there was hastily scripted. Striveclaw had done some fantastic building work with basically no notice, like worked several hours overnight and all sorts to get our confrontation with corruption and the bear on the bridge and all sorts of things working. And we had a situation where because we were near the end of a role-playing session, and because the way that the scripting worked, if anybody touched the barrier, then there was a force wave that pushed everyone off the bridge. So we were in a situation where, due to absolute chaos happening, Nat basically died for completely meaningless reasons. And this was already after another player had died on the way there. For similarly meaningless reasons, people had there was a scripted encounter and people rushed ahead trying to get across the sim and no one noticed that someone was drowning. And all of this was quite upsetting to the players and the organisers at the time, but we're very good at improvisation, so we frantically worked behind the scenes to make it into a meaningful story. And I think that we managed it, because we knew that we just could not end in a situation where two characters died for meaningless reasons and it meant nothing. That was not the sort of story that we told. So we were frantically making up a story behind the scenes and saying, okay, well, this has to happen, that has to happen. Yes. So Striveclaw and I, well, it was chaos for Nat. Nat had so many IMs from so many people. And yes, so we very quickly worked out that there was something that could be done, that someone else was, one of the Forgotten, I think, was going to make a sacrifice to let the rest of them out. So very quickly, Striveclaw said, okay, you're absolutely dead. We can't do this, we can't do that. Therefore, we're going to have to do this. And as a result, I was, oh, farewell, Vicky. Thank you for coming. So as a result, we managed to find a way to make it mean something, and then establish that the spirit, because we'd already established that the water, just by sheer chance, the water below, if anyone fell in that, their spirit would be lost. Aha! Come on, Striveclaw. My throat is sore.
No, keep going.
Tell us about you're on a roll. Tell us about your improvisation so I can take a drink.
Okay. So
I want to say something about that. Link's blames herself about Nat's and Brisby's deaths. Because, well, at the time she wasn't full water guardian. She did it, and she kept blaming herself on both of those deaths. But that was just despair and all. And behind the scenes, I'm very, very thankful that Strife and Connor worked hard on all of that. And I want to say, not me personally, my character. But I want to say thank you, Connor, for telling to us this year, because it really makes me feel a lot better. It really did, that you were playing Nat. And I am very grateful to hear this. So thank you.
Okay, so I've been informed that we have 15 minutes left, so I will get us to our final points, because we need to. It was at that point that Strifeclaw was not a good person at that point in time. In fact, the only way to open the way to the Unweaver's place there was to basically say that you were a servant of the Unweaver and you accepted him into your soul, pretty much. And that would open the gateway ahead. And she did that for them. Unfortunately, those are not the kind of words that you can just take back so easily. And she had already been affected for quite some time. So, in any case, I was staying behind. I did not go into the realm of forgotten stories. Everybody else jumped into the portal to go, despite the fact that this was a bad idea. So they made their way through, going through all of the dangers, and Nat Merritt died. I was not present as this happened. However, I knew that someone had to die in the realm of tragedy. Somebody was going to pass away before the end of the story. Because as we established at the very start, that the greatest stories have the highest highs and the lowest lows. And Connor actually had told a story that summed that up with the story of Hair Bear. Long before that, so everybody had already had their warning in a way. That this story was going to have the highest points and also the lowest of points. So that was basically their warning ahead of time. There was no such warning ahead of time this time, admittedly, but moving on. So everybody was running through, and Nat Merritt was dead. And so I said to myself, it can't just be because they died. Their death had to mean something. And so it was my pleasure to come up with something on the fly. And it was that by choosing to stay dead and the rest of the Nat Merritts to choose to also go, that they allowed their life to fight the Unweaver and open the way forth in the realm of tragedy so that they could get out of the oubliette that they had all jumped into. Because the Unweaver had left false hope for them at the bottom of the oubliette, which was the other half of the Waterstone. They had traveled here in order to reunite it with the other half. But because Nat Merritt was injured and dying, they didn't have either half of the stone with them. Because here in the realm of forgotten stories, it was drained. There was no power to use from it. It was a hopeless situation. And it only got even more tragic as Nat Merritt lost their life. But instead of just being pointless, we made it a story where Nat's sacrifice is what opened the way, and they made it to the other side. They escaped the realm of forgotten stories where they met the Dragolich the first time, which I mentioned they met again this year. And they came out crying to find, as they revealed that he had died there. Since Strifeclaw was evil at that point in time, or becoming more evil because of what they had done and because of the other corruption in the valley, she said some cruel words that I wish I didn't have had to say, but I was staying in character. Out of that, what did you idiots think would happen jumping into the realm of tragedy? What did you think would happen going to such a terrible place when you had been warned? So yeah, it was that, but we turned it around completely by making it about sacrifice, making it about something that he had died to save them from an equally tragic fate of being trapped at the bottom of an oubliette where they could not escape and they would all just become more forgotten.
And also, we'd realised that other characters were likely to be corrupted or lost within there, and basically having Nat Merritt there dead actually caused some people to who would have been lost or who would have been ignored to actually be noticed, because we had confused characters who wouldn't have made their way out on their own, who instinctively looked after Nat and were therefore led out as well, which was then incorporated into the story that I told at the end of the fair.
Yes, exactly. So everything was able to come together in a way that we didn't have more forgotten, that would have become shadows this year and turned against us. Because that is totally a thing that would have taken place, which would have been tragic in and of itself.
And again, we've touched on this previously. We've had actual stories of this told on stage, but it really humbled me and moved me so much to have so many different people, so many people contacted me to tell me how much the death of Nat Merritt, which, as I mentioned, we completely made up on the spot, and we just, between Strifeclaw and I, we were just trying to come up with some kind of way to give it meaning and make it not be something that was just not the story we were telling. It wasn't for the setting. And as a result of that, people were telling me that, I've had people tell me that they were able to grieve for actual real life losses because of what happened in the roleplay. And I mean, when it comes down to it, ultimately, what we're doing is we're providing a wrapper around. I mean, I personally find it very difficult to be part of the main Relay for Life because it's so emotionally overwhelming to hear people talking about their losses and their struggles in explicit emotional detail on the stream all the time. And I think one of the most valuable things that Fantasy Fair does is to put that wrapper of fantasy to make it into a story, because after all, stories are often how we cope with life. We cope with, art and fantasy are how we cope with our losses, with our struggles, with our traumas, with our illnesses, with all those things. And to have the wrapper of the Unweaver and not be it explicitly about cancer, to have the wrapper of, to have it be a death in a story, that's how that's so many times I've grieved through experiencing a character in a story, experiences in the same way. And at Fantasy Fair, in our role plays, it can often mean more than anything because it's a story we were directly part of. The characters can be people, we can care about the characters because we've been talking to them late at night about all sorts of things. It feels far more real to some people. And Yes, I mean, it's a pleasure. It's wonderful for so many people to tell me that I was their favourite character. And so many of you have been my favourite characters. And the stories that we tell together, the stories we make together are powerful, powerful bardic magic. I genuinely believe this. It's not just character.
Yes.
So thank you, all of you.
And I just have one more thing to say, that another cathartic part about it, and something that we haven't mentioned yet, is that we had an epilogue for the first time after the story, where we had a funeral for Nat Merritt, Brisby, and the Medicine Bear, where we climbed up the side of the mountain and we paid our respects. And then, because it was the Spirit Valley of Kirk, we, everybody except for Strathclyde and Softpaw, who wasn't aware of what they were trying to do, went and traveled to the spirit realm and got to see Nat Merritt off and say goodbye. They got to say goodbye to the Medicine Bear and Brisby before their next part of the journey. They got to see Kiaya in her true form, that of the coyote, the tricksy coyote, who would guide them on their journey to the next realm. And so people got to say goodbye to their loved ones through the role play, because we had already had a spirit world established where they had talked to the Medicine Bear. Yeah, so everybody went to it. Everybody got to say goodbye, and got to say goodbye as if it was to their own loved ones. It was cathartic, and it was by doing so that a stone was lifted. And that's one of the things that we do with role plays. That's why we have our dark moments. That's why we do not sugarcoat it. It's because we can confront them together. We can confront them together in the story, in the wrapper, and they can change a life. I can't tell you how many IMs I get that tell me that the children of stories have saved or changed their lives in some way, that it's affected them. And it's affected them because the stories get to places that are dark, that they don't want to go to, that they don't want to experience. But if they trust in it and they talk to everybody around them, they can actually work through it. So that's why we didn't sugarcoat today. And as I said,
I'll also add, that is the reason.
We are running out of time.
That is the reason why we decided. That is the reason why we decided that Nat Merritt had to stay dead everywhere. That's why the story was written, that every Nat Merritt, across all of the previous stories, across all the years, had joined in the sacrifice to push away the Unweaver. We did that because people had told us that the funeral and the goodbye were real for them and represented many things. Saying goodbye to trauma, properly grieving. We couldn't.
Yes. So now you know why, at the end of the day, I said that what happened with Arnold and his thoughts of attempt were there. For one, because it's real. For one, because I've been there. For one, because it is a stigma. For one, because it is triggering. But if we're all there and we all work through it, we can be better for it. We can be able to deal with it better. So yeah, that's why we did that. And I just want you all to know that as the last thing that we say. Okay. Saffia, I think that we could call it a night at this point, because I think that we've said everything that we want to, at least for this year.
Okay, I'm very happy to leave you here going on chatting. I have to fix up the next thing and make sure people get to where they need to go for the presentation by Walton Wainwright and his assistant. Gosh, that was a really powerful event. It was amazing. Tawny, thank you for filming, and please switch off if you haven't